In the world's largest democracy, your identity isn't just personal, it's profoundly political. Today we're diving into how gender, religion, and caste are right at the very heart of Indian politics. So how do these really deep-seated social divisions actually play out on the national stage? Well, that's what we're going to dig into.
And that really gets us to this huge fundamental question. Is all this social diversity a threat to a democratic system? Or is it actually what gives a democracy its strength? It's a tricky one. And the answer, well, it changes how we think about politics entirely.
All right, so let's jump right into this dilemma. What really happens when our personal identities, who we are, become political? We're going to look at this through the lens of gender, religion, and caste in India. And here's the thing. The real key isn't that diversity exists in the first place. What truly matters is how that diversity gets a voice, how it's expressed out in the political world. When different social groups can actually participate and make their demands heard, it can make a democracy stronger, not weaker.
Okay, so let's dive into our first case study to see how this works. Gender. We're calling this the unseen division for a reason. It's this type of inequality that often starts right in our homes, where no one's looking, but it has these massive ripple effects in public and political life. To really get a handle on this, we've got to talk about patriarchy. And it's really important to get this straight. This isn't about biology. Not at all. Patriarchy is a social system. It's built on cultural ideas and expectations that, historically, have given men more power and status than women.
And what does this system do? Well, it creates what's often called a sexual division of labor. Basically, women end up with the main responsibility for all the work at home. And while that work is absolutely essential, it's almost always unpaid and happens, behind closed doors. And because of that, it just gets completely undervalued by society.
And this slide, wow, it just lays out the stark reality of that division. Just look at these numbers from India's Time Use Survey. Men spend about 6 hours a day on paid work. Okay, but women? They do 5 full hours of unpaid household work. That's nearly 10 times what men do. And this is often on top of their own paid jobs. It's a huge, absolutely massive contribution, but it's one that often stays completely invisible.
Okay, so if women's work is so undervalued and their role is seen as being mainly in the home, what do you think the result of that is? What kind of impact does that have on their ability to participate in public life, especially in politics?
And here it is. This slide shows you the political consequence, plain and simple. With women making up just under 12% of its national parliament, India is way behind the global average of 24%. This isn't just a random number. This underrepresentation is a direct result of those inequalities that start right back in the private sphere.
But there has been a really significant political response to this. The 2023 Women's Reservation Act, which was debated for years, finally got passed. It reserves 1/3 of legislative seats for women. It's a truly landmark attempt to start fixing this massive power imbalance.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about religion. And right off the bat, it's super important to make a critical distinction here. The difference between religion, a source of moral guidance in politics, and the really dangerous, divisive ideology of communalism.
Now, this quote from Gandhi might sound a little controversial at first, right? But he wasn't arguing for a theocracy, for a state run by one religion. His point was much deeper. He believed politics should be grounded in moral values, and for many people, those values come from their religious teachings. Seen that way, religion can actually be a positive force in public life.
But, and this is a big but, the trouble starts when one single religion is seen as the foundation of the entire nation. That belief is what can create these deep divisions, and it really lays the groundwork for what we call communal politics.
So what is communalism exactly? Well, it's this belief that everyone who follows the same religion also shares the exact same interests, and that they can't possibly coexist as equal citizens with people from other faiths. You can see how this ideology is basically a recipe for political conflict.
So you can really see these two very different paths. On one side, you have the healthy expression of religion in politics. It can push for moral values, protect the rights of everybody. But on the other side, you've got communal politics, which does the opposite. It pits religious groups against each other, all fighting for dominance, and it often uses the power of the government to get what it wants.
Okay, finally, let's get to our last case study, which is a social hierarchy really unique to India, caste. Now, even though it's officially been abolished, the caste system still has this incredibly powerful influence on modern Indian society and its politics.
And that's the thing.
Even though caste-based discrimination is illegal, the legacy of this ancient system is still everywhere. We're talking about centuries of advantage for some groups and disadvantage for others, and that has created these deep economic inequalities that you can still see plain as day.
And this data, it just shows you the raw economic reality of caste. Look at rural India. The poverty rate for scheduled tribes is almost 46%. For scheduled castes, it's nearly 36%. Now compare that to the 12% poverty rate for Hindu upper castes. That's a massive gap, and it just proves how historical injustice is still shaping people's economic lives today.
Okay, now here's a really fascinating idea that kind of flips a common assumption on its head. The quote is, "It is not politics that gets caste-ridden, it is the caste that gets politicized." Just let that sink in for a second. The point isn't that politics gets corrupted by caste, but the caste itself has actively transformed by politics. This is such a crucial shift in thinking because it shows us that caste isn't just some ancient fixed problem. No, it's an active dynamic force inside the democratic process. So, what does that actually look like?
Well, it happens in a few key ways. First, individual caste groups start to expand. They bring in neighboring subcastes to become a bigger, more powerful bloc. Then, these larger groups form coalitions with other castes, trying to negotiate for more power. And out of all this, you get these new political identities emerging, like backward and forward caste groups, which become labels used to rally voters and win political influence.
Okay, so after looking at gender, religion, and caste, what's the big takeaway? I think it's pretty clear that when social identity gets political, it becomes a real double-edged sword. It has this incredible potential for positive change, but also for really destructive conflict.
So on the positive side, identity politics can be a seriously powerful tool for empowerment, right? It gives a voice to groups that have been pushed to the margins and lets them demand their fair share of power. But on the negative side, if everyone is only focused on identity, it can totally overshadow other critical issues like poverty or economic development. And then there's the danger zone. At its worst, like we saw with communalism, it can ignite tension, conflict, and even violence.
And that leaves us with a really tough question to chew on. If expressing these social divisions is the only way to empower marginalized communities, but it also comes with the risk of sparking serious conflict, how on earth does a democracy find the right balance? You know, figuring out how to navigate that tension, that might just be the biggest, most constant challenge for any diverse society out there.